Hello guys, and welcome to episode 3 of the Titanic series. And on this episode we're going to be discussing the coal fire again, but this one is going to be more different because it's going to talk about how the coal fire actually ended up saving lives the night that the Titanic sank. Now before we get into the topic, as always, please hit that like button and please subscribe. And I just want to thank you all again for all the support you've given me so far. I really appreciate it. Alright, and let's get into the video. Alright, so I've already made a video talking about the coal fire in more detail and exactly what it was and how it did not cause the ship to sink. So if you want any information about that, go check out my old video. The link is in the description. But this is my model, and you have to understand the coal fire was located right around here. This is where Boiler Room 6 was on the starboard side of the Titanic. Now, the way that they put out the coal fire at that time is they have to move the coal from the right side of the ship to the left side of the ship, from starboard to port. And as they move the coal out, they have to put the fire out as they go. But now the one thing to understand, that is a huge amount of weight. And they had been dealing with this since before the ship left Southampton. And about on the 4th day, or the day before the ship sank, they noticed they had actually put the fire out. The fire was completely out. And they had successfully moved all that coal from the right side to the left side of the ship. And now we're talking about hundreds of thousands of pounds worth of coal here, or more than that. And that was a huge chunk of the weight of the ship. And because they moved all of that weight and all of that coal, they actually made the ship list a little bit to the port side. So it wasn't much, it was only about 3 degrees. But because of all of that weight difference and everything, the ship was no longer on even keel as she was sailing. This picture is a great example of how the ship looked after they put out the fire. As you can see, she has a noticeable list to port that was the result of them moving all the coal. And as you could see from that graph that I just showed, you could actually see a lot better how the ship was listing more than what I can do on my model. And basically, the way we know this is from a passenger on the Titanic named Lawrence Beasley. And he was meticulous about how he observed everything and analyzed everything. We actually know a lot about the sinking from stuff that he did while the ship was sinking. So that's how we know about all that. And you wouldn't really realize it, but because the ship had a list to port, it made a big deal in how the sinking would later play out. At 11:40 p.m., Titanic struck the iceberg on the starboard side, the opposite side from where they moved all of the coal. And because of this, it had a great effect on how the ship actually sank. Alright, so here's the thing to understand. Since all of the coal had been moved from the right side of the ship to the left side before the iceberg impact, and the ship had that degree of list that I talked about, just because it was off of an even keel, it really affected the sinking because Titanic struck the iceberg on the starboard side, or right side. Thomas Andrews gave the ship an hour and an hour and a half to live, which is this mathematical formula that shipbuilders know on how much water's coming in, how it's displacing everything, and what's happening. And he, by his math, calculated that the ship would have about an hour, hour and a half to live, and she would simply roll over and sink. Because ships capsize. Ships capsize all the time. But an odd thing happened. As the ship began to sink, she began to lean to the starboard side. But then when the water started to move around a bit, because of the extra coal that was displaced just from the coal fire, the ship actually stabilized for a while because the water was on the right side, the coal was on the left. So she never developed a major starboard list that would cause her to roll over. This picture came from the sinking animation from the incredible team at Titanic Honor and Glory. And as you can see from this picture, not long after the iceberg impact, the Titanic had a noticeable degree of list to starboard. But then just a little bit later, you can now see from this picture how the ship is more stable. It's more or less on an even keel because the water and the coal inside have reached an equilibrium, thus making the ship stable. Yeah, so, now that's not to say that Thomas Andrews didn't, made a mistake or something like that. He knew about the coal fire. But the coal fire was such an odd thing that, there's a million things going on when a ship's sinking. And that's just one of those things that's just impossible to predict. That's just some kind of weird variable. But now, survivors also say that when the ship was in her final moments, she actually she had a very heavy list to port. And now there is a reason for that as well. Second Officer Charles Lightoller sent some men down to the D-deck gangway door where the passengers boarded the ship and told them to open the door so they could actually lower the lifeboats down to it and load passengers through the door. And these doors were never used, and they were forgotten about and left open. Yeah, so as you can see from those pictures, that the Titanic never recovered from having that gangway door open, because that gangway door, that one opening, there are estimates that that one open door was bigger than all of the iceberg damage combined. Sure, the iceberg damage was longer and it had a more, wide area from here to here, but it was little gashes, little tiny holes here and there. This was a massive door that was left open. This picture shows the Titanic after that door had went underwater, and as you can see, the ship has a noticeable list to the port side now. And you saw in those pictures how much the ship began to list after that. And the ship stayed listing to port for the rest of the sinking. And honestly, it's nothing short of a miracle she didn't roll over to the port side. But the water was so evenly displaced at that point that that's the estimate. That's the whole reasoning behind why Titanic never did capsize. Everyone, well, I hope you found this video enjoyable and entertaining and insightful. And just want to say again, I'm really enjoying making these videos, and I hope you all are liking my content. And if you all have any topics or anything that you want me to cover on Titanic, please leave a comment. Let me know about questions you have or something like that. I'd be glad to make a video about it. And this is going to be the ongoing series for this channel for a while. I'm going to be working on Titanic stuff for a little while now. And anyway, guys, as I said, like, subscribe, and do all that other fun stuff. And hey, thanks again for all your support. I really appreciate it, and I will see you in the next one.